Hello, and welcome to the next episode of the Imagination Factory. I'm Sarah.
Keith, this is number 3.
Number three. If you've joined us, you kind of know where we are, and if you haven't, go back and watch the other episodes to kind of catch yourself up. You don't want to miss out on what we've already talked about.
You can find us on Instagram, Imagination Factory. Like us there. We're always sharing clips and
Yep. Make sure you're following us everywhere. Tell your friends, join in, ask questions. We're excited to have you. So, we'd like to share a little fact about ourselves and our kind of history in this industry. So, something fun about me is I write a book series called Every Brain is Beautiful that is all about explaining neurodiversity to kids. And it started as a single book, and now it is a series that explain all different types of diagnosis so that kids can understand what these big scary words mean, like anxiety and ADHD, in words that are simple for them to understand and also don't make them feel bad about themselves.
I've we've done shows together and people gravitate towards those books, which, it's a unique, right? I think it's a unique product. I don't think a lot of people have types of books. And so it's just impressive that there is something available and they look great. And so I started doing children's books probably about 15 years ago. My mom and I have collaborated on a children's book series called Up in the Sky. I wanted to be able to have her be creative, and she had been creative, all into my childhood and young adult life, where she used to write poems, write stories, and I always really loved reading them and thinking of the visual part of it because they were always very alliterative and had this great descriptive quality to them.
Mhm.
And so when she retired, we were thinking, well, I suggested, I'm like, hey, let's do something together. I wasn't sure what it would be exactly. So we brainstormed and came up with an idea of this place where I can use my imagination to the fullest, planet that is full of crazy, strange, whimsical creatures. And she would write some kind of dialogue and poetry with it. And from there, we wrote our first children's book. Or I illustrated. She wrote, called On a Planet Named Up in the Sky. And then we did another a couple years later. What does Slog do? And then we did Above a Planet Named Up in the Sky a few years after that. And she then wrote a chapter book based off of the original children's books. So yeah, that's my children's book story.
Okay, so before we get into what we're going to talk about today, we wanted to catch you up on a few things on the visual side that Keith's been working on just to kind of keep our momentum going so that we could move on to the next part of the process. So he's going to share a little bit of that before we introduce today's topic.
Yeah. So what I did was I went over the pencils, very light pencils I had done with our second episode, where I was fleshing out the character very quickly. If you've seen it, you would see that I was just kind of like in a fugue state,
Hmm.
doing different angles and trying to get a feel for what this character looked like. Generally, if I were working on character development, I would take it to another step, which would be more of a finished pencil, and then eventually I'd ink it and maybe color it. And I wouldn't do that with everything I drew, but just to be able to get a sense of what it was that this character is going to look like within the story, and also to get ideas about what I may not want to do. Sometimes
Hmm.
style, when people ask about how do I get my style? Style isn't really something that you necessarily purposely try to get. It's more of the accidents that happen in your process that make what you do you essentially. And so when I'm doing these, I'm not thinking of always about the style, but when Sarah was talking about some of the characteristics of this character, very angular ideas came about because of it. So that's where that kind of happened. And I realized that I didn't want it to be very round. I wanted it to be very angular. And
Hmm.
so that was kind of my thinking through that. And so I wanted to develop a little bit further. And so I did that on my own time. I did record it. So for people that are members, they're going to be able to see it. It's going to essentially not have any kind of commentary to it, just music, and it may be a little bit faster, just so you can get a sense of what it would look like as a more finished pencil drawing. I may even do this inking to ink it as well or color it. I'm not sure. I haven't thought through that because obviously it takes extra time to do so. So, in
Mhm.
any case, I just thought zooming in a little bit to get a little bit more of a feel for this character
Yeah.
and how even though I'm not really showing a huge amount of emotion on their face, they do kind of emote, and that really guided me from drawing to drawing. This almost sadness and
Mhm.
tiredness, and their eyes, the way the eyes are kind of like almost like they're half asleep or haven't gotten a lot of sleep, right? So
There's a
that
real heaviness.
yeah, exactly. It came about. It really just
Mhm.
sometimes these things just happen as you're doing them. The idea is just, "Oh, what happens if I do it this way versus this way?" Or you're accidentally draw the heavy lid and realize, "Oh, I like the way that looks."
Yeah.
And so you stick with it. So in this recording, you'll be able to see that. And if you do have questions about my thought process or some of the techniques I'm using to figure out the shapes of the head and angles and all that stuff, you can always comment in our YouTube or on Instagram, ask questions, and we will happily answer them either on those platforms or during a live session.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. That is certainly helpful in seeing where you progress because I haven't seen these before now either. The emotion is great. It really does speak to the character. It's fantastic.
Yeah, and I did like add some little details like the earring
Mhm.
in each ear and the way that it's like a turtleneck kinda crumples a
Yeah.
little bit. Now I kind of seeing that, I didn't really know what the full figure would look like, but then when I started drawing it and I saw it,
Mhm.
now I have a reference that I created. It really started to give me some ideas as to what I think the way this character may dress and move, right? So oftentimes going into these things, you're like, I'm not sure what this is going to be. And
Mhm.
then as you draw and accidents happen, you're racing and then you're adding things in, you start to get some answers and little happy accents. Like I said before, we are like, wonder if I were to draw some kind of earring in there, what would that look like? Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. If it doesn't work, you erase it, right?
No, that's great. Excellent. Well, that kind of brings us into what we're going to talk about and work on today, which is the flow of the story. So, we're not going to go beat by beat on the entire thing. What we're going to do is we're going to break it down kind of page by page because it's a 4-page story, we've decided. So, sort of what needs to happen broadly on each page to get us from where we're starting to where we need to be. So, we're not going to do every single frame or anything like that right now. We're just going to do what is the vibe of this page, and we're going to start doing that. So, I'm going to share my screen because I've put down a few sort of thought starters for how we're going to approach this. Okay. So, to start with, kind of the purpose of each page is essentially how I'm breaking this down. So, for page 1 is the arrival and disruption. So, the purpose of this page is our character arrives and realizes something's going on. So, we're establishing the normalcy and then we're introducing the wrongness. So, it starts off kind of, hey, I'm in a new apartment. That's weird. What's that? So the emotional beat for this page is this must be nothing. I just need clarification. So nothing is wrong yet. This is just like, oh, this is weird. Someone's going to be able to help me out. So that's sort of where we're going to start for page 1. Now, for the best thing to do, Keith, do you want to just do one page at a time or do you want to go through all 4 of them?
I think it's a good idea to go through all four of them
Let's do it.
because if just to explain my thinking about it
Mhm.
is just that if there's certain details that are mentioned, even from this, even though it's very just sparse, simple, stripped down,
Yeah.
there may be certain elements that are evoking imagery in my head. And if I start with one idea for page one and it changes from page one to page four, where there's now a new detail that I didn't think about. Like, let's
Yeah.
say, for example, the character, it's winter, and you kind of mentioned by the fourth page, you're not even mentioning so much that it's like winter per se, but that the character's really, really cold. Well, maybe I would make sure that the clothing they're wearing in the
Yeah. It would
first
affect page
page,
1.
yeah, exactly. It's going to make
Perfect.
sense, right? So
Excellent.
that's my thinking behind it.
Let's do it. Let's go through all 4 of them before we start. So that's page 1. Then for page 2, the theme of this page is avoidance and control. So for this one, we want to show the denial through the action. So this is that feeling of if I can't remove it, I can at least ignore it. So we had talked about rearranging the room a lot, and that's sort of this page, which is how do I ignore it? How do I just pretend it's not there? Then on to page 3, I'm calling it obsession and erosion. So this is control to fixation. So we went from trying to pretend it's not there and control it to becoming obsessed with the store. So this is that it means something, it has to. So again, we talked about going through the pages, looking for notes, looking for reasons why this thing existed and what it means. So that's sort of page 3. And then our final page is choice and aftermath. So resolution without explanation. The search for answers ends not with truth, but with absence. So we never actually answer what happened, but we get to that end. We open the door and we go through, and that's the end of it. So those are the 4 sort of sections of our 4-page story to move us relatively quickly through it because we have to accomplish a lot in 4 pages. So I am going to stop sharing, but I'm going to send this to you in the chat so that you have it as reference and we can start looking at how this will come to life.
Okay. And so one of my thoughts, I should explain how what you're doing here is a little different than the way that I may receive a script from
Mhm,
another writer. And so the way you're doing this is actually it's interesting. This is new for me. I quite enjoy it because it's giving me a different sense of how to approach this character. So in many cases, the writer may send me character descriptions, and the character's descriptions will be more on the visual side of it. This is more of like an emotional beat. It's more of like
mhm,
a sense of what this page is going to be like. And so for me, what I'm thinking about is how do I translate that into some actions the character is going to go through on the page, and therefore it's giving me like with that first one, it's like what is that? That's so their
mhm,
stance is going to be a little bit more on the quixotic side. They're not necessarily going to be doing anything that's really big. They
mhm,
just may be standing, and maybe that their heads kind of they're looking at it and their head is like tilted to the side a little bit. They're going, I what? Maybe their hand is, like that's kind of what I'm getting. And
mhm,
so what I'm doing here is I'm just going with what how I feel, the emotional sense I'm getting from this, from the description you're
mhm.
giving me.
It's funny that you brought that up because I approach this differently than I normally would in that respect because we are doing this sort of very quick kind of 4-act story. For me, it was more about figuring out that sort of feel of each page that would move us through it, right? So as opposed to being so strict in terms of the action or what was happening, it was more, this is what this page is accomplishing, right? And then letting you interpret that into a visual versus it being overly prescriptive because there's so many ways we can do these things, but these things need to happen in order to get to the next stage of the story.
Yeah, and for anybody who is trying to replicate this in a way that makes sense for them, could because we're doing this in a very organic way where we're going back and forth and feeding off of each other's ideas, which may not necessarily be the case if again, if you're working by yourself or if you have somebody who's written something already. So this is a different way of approaching things in
Mhm,
that really we are in some ways going kind of blind, right? Like I'm not exactly that this is the first time I've seen this, so I haven't really had the opportunity to think about it. So I'm going with what's really immediate in my mind.
mhm,
Even though I know generally how the story is going to be, I'm still going with just this gut feeling, my experience, how I
mhm,
feel this character would emote. It may or may not work. I don't know. And I'm drawing this in a very rough way, gestural way, so that
mhm,
I'm not thinking too much about the uh, like the making it look like technically correct. Maybe the arm may be a little bit too long, or the way that they're standing, the feet. may not be exact, right? But I'm just trying to get like an immediate emotional sense from it.
And that's an interesting observation as well, is that there is something to be said for having an immediate emotional reaction, because that is how people read stuff, right? That is how people look at art, is they don't get time to pre-think about it and digest it. It's immediately, how do they feel? What do they see? So it is a neat exercise to do something like this and not give yourself days and weeks to ponder over something and to just like, where does my mind immediately go and how am I going to represent that? And to just sort
Hmm.
of see the feeling and letting that come through. And this is that type of story as well. This is that type of story that is really about feel versus heavy plot and dialogue, right? So this does lend itself to this style more than other types of stories will.
Yeah. So what would you what like how did you come upon doing it this way? Like what was your thinking with that?
So my thinking with it was a little bit of, I really wanted to find a way to make it a true collaboration, right? So I wanted to leave it open ended as much as possible so that you could interpret it versus coming in with it very clean cut. Here's the answer. Here's what I want you to execute. I also, because this story is really visually driven, right? Like we talked about from the get go, this one really is that, feel it in the pit of your stomach, gut kind of a story. I wanted to kind of keep it at that emotional level. And then once we sort of got each page down, then really figure out the beat by beat frames for it in order to really execute it plot wise. But this one just felt like it needed emotion before plot to then figure out the little things that needed to happen to tell the story.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and that's just it. We were doing things a little bit different than we may do in other situations, but that's what makes us really kind of fun is
Hmm.
that we're trying to unlock our imagination in a way where it may be just more organic, and it because of this process, doing it this way where you're breaking it down in this just describing the emotional
Hmm.
beat of the story really makes for me at least, it just it's kind of it's thrilling, right? It makes it a lot more it's like I'm on the seat of my pants. I have no idea what I'm gonna be doing. I didn't really have any idea going in other than
Yeah.
I kind of decided, I think, what the clothing would be, but otherwise, I really didn't have any idea, like, what I was gonna be doing
Hmm.
exactly for this first page or although, I mean, in some ways you kind of figure we're building up to something. It doesn't start
Yeah.
off as like the person in panic mode. So I wouldn't have necessarily thought the character would be in a very like type of
Yeah, I mean, this does follow it really does follow where we've been and where we planned on going. It's just providing it to you in a slightly different way of explaining it, right? Like, it's sort of what we've talked about from the beginning of that, phone a friend moment of what's going on, that searching for answers, all those things. It's just putting the emotion as the leader versus the specifics of the action. So letting the emotion lead the story. And as we kind of talked about as well, depending on which story we had picked in episode 1, that probably would have changed how we approached it as well. Because depending on the type of story we were doing, we would have approached it slightly differently, but because this one is such a, psychological thriller, it kind of needed a slightly different approach.
yeah. Well, that's right. And I think that's you have to be creative with this stuff. Like
Mhm.
it's if you are starting this journey where you've never done anything like this at all, like, then this may be a very different way from anything you'd ever thought of doing because or you may not know any different, I should say. You may not even know that this is a kind of different way of doing it. This may feel very natural to you if you're trying it this way. And you're like, yeah, my sensibility kind of works along this line too. So I'm going to do this, and I may do this with every single uh, you know, story I do, which is
Mhm.
first I'm going to just like brainstorm ideas, write down like a single sentence, and then from there I'm going to break it down by the emotional beats per page, which I think there's something great to trying it that way. And for those of you that are watching this going, I've never even thought about doing it this way, because I personally haven't really thought about doing it this way. Mine has been a little bit more traditional, which is the writer and I will have a conversation, and then the writer will come back with a script, and then
Mhm.
that script is usually a guideline for me to follow, where this is a more organic process.
Mhm.
So breaking it up in this way is actually it's approaching it in a different way that is going to eventually get us to the same conclusion by the end of the story. But it's kind of shaking it up so that we can, like, who knows what's going to come from this that I may never have done before because of it.
Yeah, and I think it's important to know how to do everything by the book, by the letter, by the rules, and then it's also important to realize that those are more guidelines, right? So you wanna make sure that you properly establish characters, you wanna make sure that you know where your story's going, you know your plot, you know your ending, all of those things. You can't skip them, but there's also lots of ways to get to the end result, like you were just saying, right? Like, there's many roads that you can take, and this is a slightly different one. And I think it's important as a creative person to be creative in all aspects of what you do and don't get so locked into formulas of this is how I must create because you might actually miss out on something neat because you didn't try that way. So be willing to sort of try a slightly different approach and see where it takes you.
Yeah, that's right. And that is a very good point that you have to know what the rules are to be able to
Mhm.
break them. We're
Yeah.
providing all those rules. We're just doing it in a slightly different
Yeah.
way, right? So you still have to be able to tell what the story is in a single line, which is like a pitch, right?
Mhm.
That's what we call an elevator pitch, be able to describe in a single line. And then from that, develop it into more of a story with an outline, right?
Mhm.
Which this is kind of like an outline, and alongside of that, you're also gonna be developing the character and the world, like, what does it look like? How's the character gonna behave? And then the next step is going to be what we're gonna be doing, in a subsequent episode, which is developing each page a bit more, right? So, we are going to be taking you along in a way that it is the rules, just we are not doing it in like a traditional sense,
Mhm.
which may be more familiar to most people.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think if you've done this long enough, as we both have, you've done it the traditional way more times than you can count. And you've also found other
Mhm.
ways that give interesting results that are a lot of fun to do. And this is kind of one of those ways. So, especially if you're working with somebody else, challenging each other in this way is also really good, right? So that it's not always so prescriptive one way back and forth that you just end up getting stuck in like this is just how I do things versus is this the best work I could do? No, because this is just how I do things, right? Where we're giving each other the opportunity to kind of push it and be like, you know, in the spur of the moment, I'm giving you this thing. What are you going to do with it? And already I can see we're getting some really neat things instantly out of you.
Yeah, so I moved on to 2, which is
Hmm.
avoidance and control. The purpose is to show denial through action. Emotional beat, if I can't remove it, I can at least ignore it. So I'm almost like in this way, I'm thinking, okay, this person is now kind of looking over their shoulder at it. Like,
Hmm.
I'm going to do other things. I'm feeling confident enough that I'm going to do something else. But at the same time, the thing is kind of like calling to me. And so
Yeah.
it's that, it's a little bit like a paranoia starting to set in. It's like, I'm going to try to ignore this by arranging my books, but there's something there's a door there, and what is
It's
that
like the
door there
more
for?
they try to ignore it, the more it becomes bigger, right? Like, it's like that
Yeah,
elephant in the room feeling. The more they go out of their way to not notice it, the more it becomes obvious, which I think is really interesting. Like, it's working the opposite way, and the character just starting that anxiety starting to kinda creep in of, "Nope, I don't need to pay attention to this," but really, that's all they can think about.
yeah. Well, that's it. So what does that look like? It's kind of like, maybe you're sitting down at the table, and then you just stop what you're doing to look at it, right?
Mhm.
So it's taking on some mundane tasks, but in the midst of that mundane, you can't focus because it keeps on calling to you.
Yeah, I liked what we had talked about. I think it was back in episode 1 with the idea that it's even like, turning off the TV and you see the reflection of the door in the TV. So even like, trying to watch TV, like just get my brain away from it and you still see that reflection of the door there. Like no matter what they do, it's just in everything. It's all that they can focus on in that entire space.
Yeah, that's right. We'll have to think of like how that's going to look when we break it down by panels. Like how can we use
Exactly.
that yeah. But yeah, that's actually a good one to so it's all in this case, I'd just be like blocking,
Hmm.
trying to figure out how to make it so you have a TV there that maybe they don't even have a lot of furniture. So it's like on books or something. And they're sitting on the ground and the reflection of the door is there.
Yeah. That already, like, already just with these few simple sketches, you can already feel the vibe change from one to two, right? Like, you can feel that, like, I'm new here, just moving in. This is weird, but I'll live with it. To two, you can already feel the tension and I'm trying not to pay attention, but this is not right. So,
Yeah, and that's right. There's a little bit more of like a um, whimsy for the first one. I guess, oh, what is that? It's and now they're going to be like, I
yeah.
really having
Why
a
is
hard
that?
time ignoring it now.
Exactly, exactly. So, but we're just about coming up on the half hour. That was super fast half hour. So we're going to keep going on the next two pages, but we're going to sign off from here and we will catch you on the next episode. Again, make sure you're subscribing, join our membership, see the second half of this episode if you're interested, and follow us online. We're going to be sharing clips from both halves during the week, and we'll see you again next week. Perfect.
Thank you. Bye bye.